Eager to please with opening scenes that throw us straight into the meat grinder, the horror genre likes to start things off with a bang, blowing up in a story to really get our attention. More often than not, horror movie openings act as their own mini-narratives, delivering a separate precursory story to explain what our protagonists are coming up against, without giving the game away entirely. And brace yourself guys, because we have a lot of them to talk about today. As I'm Adam, this is What Culture Horror, and here are 30 scariest opening horror movie scenes ever. Number 30, Quamass and the Pit. John Carpenter has made no secret of his love for the Nigel Neal scientist character Quamass and his exploits, often editing his own films under the pseudonym John Quamass. Carpenter even solicited a script from Neal for Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, though little of his product ever made it to screen. The atmosphere and plot, however, aren't that far from Quamass 2. Quamass and the Pit is a bit of a slow burn sci-fi, but its first encounter with the antagonists is not without tension. While expanding a metro line, workers uncover what appears to be a Martian UFO. A hole opens in the ship, revealing three-legged insectoid beasts. Now there are plenty more interesting conflicts at the heart of Quamass, namely science versus military reaction to invasion, but once the threat is made clear, the terror is there. The beasts are at least 5 million years old and very, very dead. They are, in fact, ghosts of Martians intent on colonizing Earth with their spirits in our bodies. It's much more of a heady fear than anything else on this list, but the implications, including a kind of racial purge and propaganda, is absolutely more terrifying. Number 29, Mimic. It's understandable that Guillermo del Toro was disappointed with the results of his first English-language film, Mimic. Arguments on set between he and producer Bob Weinstein were frequent, and the visionary Helmer wasn't allowed a final cut until a DVD release years later, adding 6 minutes of footage he couldn't include for some reason in the theatrical. Despite all that, and Del Toro's best efforts, the movie is a fairly derivative standard monster movie script with little innovation. There's nothing really fresh, but the plot is at least somewhat intriguing. After a brief introduction explaining a new virus is being spread by cockroaches, killing children en masse, entomologist Susan Tyler finds a solution: starve them to death. 3 years later, however, the new species of cockroach has, as Jeff Goldblum says, found a way. Using its ability to mimic its prey, in this case appearing like a figure in a trench coat, before attacking. It's to Del Toro's credit that the film is scary at all, never more than during the opening attack on an unwitting priest. He's suddenly snatched away by an unknown assailant. The only witness is an autistic child who can't express what happened verbally. And later, it actually breaks horror movie taboos by killing young children. Number 28, The Void. 2016's The Void is a peculiar entry here, with great creature effects that were largely crowdfunded by Indiegogo and a small budget and release. It received critical acclaim, and any fans of 80s horror were awash with joy at something new but still familiar was finally in theaters again. Like the best sci-fi / horror with Lovecraftian elements, The Void throws its audience into the unknown almost instantaneously and refuses to let up. 2 people flee a farmhouse, with one escaping, the other shot and doused in gasoline before being burned alive. The survivor is rushed to a nearby hospital run by a skeleton crew of nurses and a few doctors, only to learn quickly they're surrounded by robed members of a cult, determined to keep them inside. It isn't long into the film before a nurse is in a trance, brutally murdering a patient, her face flayed of flesh. Tentacles grow, bodies are mutilated and transformed, and answers are, well, vague at best. But it's the kind of nostalgic throwback that audiences were craving. Number 27, From Beyond. From Beyond, Stuart Gordon's second and not final foray into Lovecraft's body of work, is very much the opposite of his comical Reanimator. It takes the science and thematic terror much more seriously. You know your movie is Freudian when a character literally bites off the third eye of a monstrous rape creature. Dr. Crawford Tillinghast, who along with partner Dr. Pretorius have invented the Resonator, a device that allows the mind to see beyond what it can normally perceive by activating the pineal gland. Within moments of turning it on, strange interdimensional beings float in view of the doctors. They immediately turn aggressive, taking bites out of the scientists. Tillinghast is locked up in a mental institution after Pretorius is found decapitated, But psychologist Catherine McMichaels starts to find his outrageous story credible after a CT scan reveals his pineal gland is enlarged. Reluctantly, he returns to the Reanimator with McMichaels and a detective. The opening kill scene is hectic and nausea-inducing enough, and I'm sure you can imagine, things only get worse from there. Number 26, Black Sunday. Black Sunday is the old but gold 1960s horror that sees a witch return from the dead to seek revenge on her descendants. But of course, first things first, to return from the dead means that one must have died. The opening of Black Sunday sees this happen to Aza, tied up to a stake as her own brother condemns her to death. Understandably unhappy with this outcome, Aza curses him, but it does nothing to stop the Mask of Satan, a barbaric piece of metal for the face with nails pointing inward like an Iron Maiden, being applied and then hammered into her skull for good measure. You can even see the blood spurt out from around the edges, which is pretty grim. Considering the time period of this one, Black Sunday is an unusually grisly movie, depicting some horrible turns of fate that managed to get the movie banned in the UK upon release, and for a good few years after. Recognised as an Italian classic now, the film has done the crimes and done its time, making for some seriously spooky watching for those after a terrifying throwback. Number 25, The Stepfather. Bringing an eerie calmness to mass destruction and death, The Stepfather's opening is one that will send shivers down your spine. Building up as Terry O'Quinn goes about his daily routine with a remarkable ease considering what's waiting for him downstairs. After seeing his face covered in blood, we watch as he changes and takes a shower, altering his appearance in the process by cutting his beard and hair. Dressing smartly and cleaning up the corridors as he travels around the house, it isn't until he descends the stairs that we truly see the extent of the man's actions. A room littered with the remains of his family and a home destroyed in the struggle. The Stepfather's narrative then goes on to reveal a man that repeatedly makes a whole new identity for himself, remarries, settles into a family, and then brutally murders them, leaving it up to one particularly spunky stepdaughter to spot the man's violent tendencies before it's too late. The movie brings a whole new meaning to the term family man. Really. Number 24, Reanimator. Horror writer H.P. Lovecraft hated Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and had trouble keeping it to himself. Almost on a lark, he set about creating his own character who obsesses over reanimating the dead. Herbert West, Reanimator. Director Stuart Gordon adapted the short story into the movie Reanimator. Most of the film is tongue-in-cheek, over-the-top violence, and star Jeffrey Combs has since become a quirky icon for horror fans. That said, the opening scene is no joke. It lets viewers know two things. First, this is going to be a violent ride, and second, it's probably going to push a few boundaries. The film begins at the University Zurich, a man in a lab coat screaming in agony. As authorities burst in the locked office door, the doctor's blood-covered face spasms, his eyes bulging before exploding out of his head. "You killed him," a nurse says. "No," replies West. "I gave him life." Cue the rip-off of the Psycho theme, but also welcome to one of the most entertaining horror films of the decade. Number 23, Twilight Zone, the movie. The film adaptation of Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone is a series of vignettes, each handled by a different filmmaker. They all range in tone, from Joe Dante's cartoonish adaptation of It's a Good Life, to Steven Spielberg's overly sentimental Kick the Can, to the absolute best, George Miller's famous William Shatner starring episode Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. But each individual short mostly holds their own well, and the cold open is fantastic. It's unlikely anyone would expect Dan Aykroyd's name on a list like this, unless we're talking about Nothing But Trouble, but alas, he and comedian Albert Brooks are driving down a dark, winding road late at night. Brooks starts to play little games, speeding up and turning off the headlights, scaring his passenger. When he pulls over, Aykroyd asks him, "Want to see something really scary?" Turning his head away from the camera, he returns as a hideous monster, eating Brooks as the infamous narration begins and the titles roll. It's scary, it's funny, and it sets the perfect tone for a film that jumps from laughter to abject terror. So well executed, the scare is even called back at the film's end. Number 22, Darkness Falls. Sometimes amazing openings aren't attached to particularly amazing films. And whilst Darkness Falls might not be the best horror movie going, its opener is definitely one of the most chilling out there. Starting with an old tale of Matilda Dixon, an immediately creepy campfire story is told through flickering candlelight, revealing how the woman was accused of being involved in the disappearance of 2 children for her kindness towards them in life. Known as the Tooth Fairy for giving them coins when they lost teeth, she was wrongfully killed by the townspeople, and is alleged to come and seek vengeance in the town of Darkness Falls as a result. And oh boy, does she come avenging alright. In one of the most tense hide under the covers moments, the porcelain masked Matilda lurks in the darkness of a young boy's room, ensnaring his mother after being spotted in a reflection, and eventually finding her home looming over a doorway waiting to pounce. The rest of the movie might not hold up as well, but Darkness Falls opening 2 punches absolutely hit home. Number 21, Terrified. Horror specialist streaming service Shudder has done wonders for the genre in recent years, and Terrified is just one of the excellent titles they've championed that graces their library. The film follows 3 paranormal investigators as they try to figure out what strange goings-on are plaguing a neighborhood in Buenos Aires, with the opening a stark look at what sort of supernatural terror lies in wait for our team. We open in a suburban neighborhood as Clara tells her husband she can't cook dinner. Voices from the sink are telling her they'll kill her. I mean, fair enough. Probably best to go to sleep in the house threatening her murder then. Clara and Juan go to bed, where we see them in the early hours of the next morning as Clara goes to the bathroom. Cut to banging noises. A noisy neighbor perhaps? We get a few minutes of Juan popping off at next door before realizing Clara is the one banging, or at least her dead body is. The screen is filled with her bloodied corpse as it batters itself from wall to wall in the shower, horrifying in its simplicity and abject strangeness. Number 20, Children of the Corn. One of Stephen King's most creepy novels adapted to the screen, Children of the Corn is your typical 80s horror movie served with lashings of violence and a more than fair share of cheesy filmmaking, telling the story of a cult that takes over a remote town in Nebraska. Whilst it's aged like milk in the years since its release, Children of the Corn's opening is one that has long preserved the movie despite its flaws, making for an entirely terrifying introduction to the very naughty Isaac and his wayward congregation. We begin with a voiceover from young Job, watching as he leaves church with his dad and stops by a diner to grab a milkshake. As his dad calls home to check on Job's sick sister Sarah, a group of youths walk in and lock the door behind them. But that's all the warning we get that something isn't quite right. No sooner has a table downed their coffee, they are choking on poison, as the young townsfolk brandish all manner of knives, scythes, and pointy things to bleed the poor breakfast patrons dry. Number 19, Trick or Treat. Following Halloween tradition and the unfortunate fate of those that decide to go against it, Trick or Treat is a film featuring 4 intertwining tales of horror unfolding in a neighborhood, linked by one strange burlap sack-wearing little creature with an interest in gory murder. Before we get stuck into such menial stuff as school bus massacres and sex parties, however, we're introduced to the black comedy in dramatic fashion, starting with 2 Halloween revelers returning to their heavily decorated home. Frustrated and wanting to finish up cleaning to make the job easier for the morning, Emma decides to start taking down the spooky ghost sheet props there and then. But punishment always comes for those that break Halloween rules. As it turns out, taking decorations down before midnight is absolutely one of them. Now this is useful information to know, considering she gets her throat slashed by a broken lollipop after an attack by an unseen force, then hung up on her own ghostly prop frame. It does seem a bit of a lose-lose situation when it's the choice between a raging house fire caused by an unattended jack-o'-lantern or bloody crucifixion via candy death, but hey. Number 18, The Mist. After a jolting opening in which a tree crashes through the window of artist David Drayton, he's forced to go to the grocery store with his son and a neighbor for supplies, as a strange fog gathers over the lake. Within minutes of shopping, however, alarms ring and a man runs in the store in a panic, followed by a wave of the menacing fog. Turns out there are creatures hidden through the fog. Unspeakable, rarely fully revealed horrors that attack and brutally strip flesh, limbs, and other appendages from the stranded gaggle of shoppers. There's no official explanation for their appearance, and the ultimate conflict in the film is a showdown between blind faith and human logic. But one army officer does explain the beasts are interdimensional beings that escaped through a portal at a nearby army base. More Lovecraftian terror than outright sci-fi, The Mist is a deeply cynical work, heightened by Darabont's handheld shooting style he incorporated from his previous work on The Wire. Number 17. Cube. Director Vincenzo Natali's directorial debut has followed his career throughout, each film putting its audience in a state of vague confusion and discordance before unveiling the thrust of the story. Cube opens with a Kafka-esque situation, as a bald man in what appears to be some sort of prison outfit awakens in an empty room. A hatch is present on each of the 4 walls. It's clear he's uncertain of his surroundings, or even how he got there, so he travels through one of the hatches to explore. What happens next is fairly infamous, to the extent that director Paul W.S. Anderson has blatantly ripped it off more than once throughout his Resident Evil franchise. As he cautiously walks forward, a wall of thread-thin, sharp wires flies through him. His body falls to many small pieces in the shape of the title of the movie after remaining still for a moment. It's not only jarring, but it sets up the rest of the film, where characters are to find an escape route of booby-trapped rooms, all cubes housed within a larger cube. And that there's no explanation for their entrapment, some sort of twisted variation on the Stanford prison experiment, a perverse torture dome for billionaires or worse, only adds to the dread. Number 16. Dawn of the Dead 2004. Yes, it's a remake of George A. Romero's classic of the same name, but that doesn't do anything to lessen the visceral, blood-soaked rollercoaster ride that is 2004's Dawn of the Dead. Functioning as Zack Snyder's happy place, the film follows the familiar beats of a group of survivors trapped in a shopping mall as a zombie plague takes over the rest of the world, attempting to devise a plan to survive as best they can in this apocalyptic vision of an alternate present. The opening sequence is designed to hammer home just how aggressively normality has been flipped upside down, beginning low and slow in establishing Anna's average existence as both a nurse and a loving wife, ending on a peaceful note as a new morning rolls in. But the new day brings a whole new world with it. A little girl is the first diseased weapon of mass destruction, as she tears Anna's husband's throat out in front of her. Then everything spirals out of control. The suburban bliss of Anna's life is now bloodied and burnt, as a drive around the neighborhood quickly confirms. The transformation is insanely fast, terrifyingly violent, and surprisingly heartbreaking. Absolutely no time is wasted with this powerhouse of an opening. And as always guys, I just want to ask you one quick question. What is your favorite horror movie opening? The one that you think knocks it out the park, it sets the tone, it gets the scares right, and it just pulls you straight into the movie. Make sure you let us know down in the comments below, and while you're there, give us a like and a subscribe. And thanks so much for checking out this mammoth video with us today. Alright, now back to the list. Number 15, 28 Weeks Later. Any zombie movie worth its salt will have an opening packed full of bloodied undead bad boys, and 28 Weeks Later is no different. Coming as the sequel to Danny Boyle's genre-sparking 28 Days Later, Weeks had something to prove very quickly if it was going to live up to the heights of its predecessor. Going in on claustrophobic, instantaneous nightmare fuel when a horde of undead nasties break into the home of a group of survivors, it isn't long until almost everyone is effectively wiped out in the space of 10 minutes, setting the scene for Robert Carlyle's cowardly escape and subsequent attempt at redemption throughout the rest of the movie. Seeing the terror on the inhabitants' faces paralleled with the uncomfortably well-designed harbingers of the rage virus makes for an incredible opening, and all the more so for establishing such a tight-knit group of friends prior to the attack, complete with the sweetest old lady. Number 14. It. It's almost hard to decide which iteration of It is more effective, as whilst the 1990 miniseries has definitely not aged well, looking at you giant deadly spider showdown, Tim Curry remains one of the most intense character creators on screen. His version of Pennywise is something that has haunted poor unsuspecting adults and children for generations. But it's Bill Skarsgård's fanged maw that wins out by the skin of his teeth. Drawing down an unsuspecting child into his sewer lair after a paper boat falls into the drain, Pennywise the clown takes his time to convince young Georgie that he isn't a threat, and is simply being blown into the sewer along with the circus. Reaching in to collect his lost boat, Pennywise tears off the poor thing's arm without a second thought. It's a brilliant setup for a continuously horrifying movie, but you know, might be worth moving somewhere where it never rains for good measure. Number 13, A Quiet Place. What better way to introduce an almost entirely silent film than with some, well, silence? Very clearly setting the tone through a raid in an abandoned shop for medicine, a family executes their movements with painstaking precision, letting us know that the who can stay quiet the longest game is actually a serious endeavor and not something dire to entertain their children. And unfortunately, a noisy toy leads to the breakneck speed death of the youngest child, executed with terrifying speed and visuals that will make your stomach turn. What started as a movie that you'd assume to build slowly and carefully suddenly comes crashing in with all guns blazing, and the quietness you sit through afterwards becomes an exercise in self-preservation as much as dramatic tension. Honestly, it's just a bloody scary opening, and one that keeps you on your toes for the entirety of the feature. Number 12, The Ring. Now you'd be right in berating this entry for not being Japanese classic Ringu, but the American remake that made waves in 2002 did hit the nail on the head with this stinger of an opening act. I mean, there's got to be a reason it inspired all of those subpar westernized remakes of classic Asian cinema after all, and is one of the very few that retains a proper sense of horror from its very first step out of the screen. Showing, not telling, is key for filmmaking, and showing us the fate of a schoolgirl that has seen a cursed videotape and will succumb to its powers is done with an expert hand as The Ring plays out. Katie realizes all too late that the legends of an entity murdering anyone who watches a particular video are true, as she wanders through her house to televisions turning on, water leaking under doorways, and the all too suffocating feeling of something hiding in plain sight. Nothing particularly outrageous happens, but that's exactly what makes it so stomach-churning. We end with a zoom in on Katie's distorting face as she sees something we cannot, enough to keep curiosity piqued until we learn of Samara's grisly fate. Number 11, Final Destination. The series that made the beginning 10 minutes the most important of any blockbuster. All the movies in the franchise open with an intrusive thought and blow it up into a full-scale anxiety dream. The first entry asking the question of what would happen if we hit turbulence, before showing in excruciating detail every terrifying malfunction that would drop the plane into a hurtling fireball of death out of the sky. Whilst I'll admit the third installment is a close contender for the rollercoaster nightmare that is all too spectacularly realized, the first movie remains one of the most persistent fears for those averse to flying, depicting an international flight go down in a freak accident in a premonition by high schooler Alex Browning. If you've ever had the pre-flight jitters in any capacity, then Final Destination embeds itself deep in your brain and turns on that irrational primal fear like nothing else. The car pileup, the bridge collapse, and the speedway accident all serve their purposes well and have their places for different audience fears. But the flight formula was the true perfect storm. Alright, we're entering the top 10 now everyone, and let's kick this off with number 10, It Follows. Built on the concept of creeping dread in more ways than one, It Follows is a cult favorite of the genre for all the right reasons. Its slow-burning, intense, inescapable narrative spearheading the trend for spooky smart movies like we've never seen before. The film itself is one that follows a terrifying invisible entity that stalks those like an STD, attaching itself to a host that it relentlessly walks after when they have sex with an infected person, and moving on to the next when they have sex with someone new. In the opening, we see the terrifying effects in which a young girl flees an unseen pursuer and says goodbye to her family before turning up crumpled like a Ryvita biscuit on the beach. It's a gripping opening and one that's terrifying for the unknown quantity of the attacker, but becomes all the more deeply upsetting when you've seen the film and rewatch. The stark rationalization, death of hope, and grisly end become all too real by the end. Number 9, Evil Dead 2013. Alright, moving on to one of my personal favorites now, Half the battle of remakes is proving that it's a worthy rehash of a story we've already seen. Often the best way of doing this is to make a killer opening that instills a bit of hope into a viewer that what they're about to watch is a worthwhile endeavor. But the wonderful Evil Dead is only just getting started with its gnarly opening gambit. Presented with a bloodied girl wandering through a forest, it's soon revealed that she's being hunted. Of course, you'd assume by virtue of horror movie tropes that it's an innocent woman on the run from depraved backwoods locals, and that's precisely how the scene plays out for the most part. It's only when her dad steps forward to condemn the girl for killing her mother that her desperate pleas begin to ring false. Strapped to a pyre and set alight, something is definitely not right with our sweet dear daughter, as a demonic presence makes itself known and gets real nasty with Daddy. It's visceral, gory, and exceptionally over the top, but then Evil Dead is all of those things and more, and we love it for it. Number 8. Ghost Ship. Whilst not necessarily worth it after the opening scene, Ghost Ship will at least give you a good ride for the first 5 minutes, functioning as a campy introduction to a mediocre movie. If you're squeamish, this maybe isn't the one for you. Ghost Ship opens to a sultry Italian song performed to a ship of cruise passengers, idly dancing away and generally having a lovely old time. With pink cursive credits gracing the screen and a young girl dancing with the ship's captain in a mushy display of family friendliness, it isn't long until the film decides to say, yeah, screw this, and slices everyone in half with a rogue metal wire mysteriously set loose. It comes quite out of nowhere, with even the passengers themselves taking a moment to be shocked before their torsos slither apart and they spend their dying breaths clutching their separated body parts. It's scary in the same way as Final Destination, utilizing freak accidents to make you realize that it could, in a very unlikely but still plausible scenario, actually happen. And then you just end up nervously laughing so you don't cry instead. Or is that just me? Number 7. Quarantine. Found footage films are a difficult feat to pull off. Just getting the audience to suspend their disbelief long enough for them to stop shouting, "Just drop the camera and run, idiot," is hard enough. And there are other challenges the subgenre presents itself. The lamest example is Matt Reeves' Cloverfield, in which Hood, the cameraman who suddenly has a suspiciously good eye, explains his desire to keep filming. "People are gonna wanna know, you know," he says, "how it all went down." Okay, Hood. Okay. Though essentially a shot-for-shot remake of the Spanish-language film Wreck, Quarantine still manages to pack a punch and adds one element that is absent from the original. While covering a night-in-the-life story of a local firefighting station, reporter Angela is thrust in the middle of a 911 call at a rundown apartment complex. Things seem status quo, until a body suddenly drops into the lobby and all hell breaks loose. Soon the survivors are locked in, suddenly surrounded by military officers ordered to shoot any who try to escape on sight, as zombie-esque creatures tear through the building. Rex' brief, vague explanation has no basis in science but faith. It turns out that one of the residents was an agent of the Vatican investigating the transference of demonic possession. Quarantine, however, grounds its reasoning in the science fiction realm, with news clippings hinting at a doomsday cult and a break-in at a chemical weapons lab. Either film is definitely worth the watch though. Number 6. Sesperia. Suspiria's opening scene is undeniably effective from its synth-heavy soundtrack, as jangling, uncomfortable music interwoven with eerie whispers dominates the frames from the outset and throughout. Telling the story of a prestigious dance academy with a dark secret student Susie slowly uncovers, Dario Argento's influential horror masterpiece isn't to be messed with, and it makes that clear right from the opening sequences. After being locked out of the building she's supposed to stay in after arriving late at night, Susie sees student Pat burst out and run away as quickly as possible. Fleeing an unknown terror, she makes it to a friend's apartment, though it isn't much help. Pat ends up launched through a sunroof after getting stabbed repeatedly, and then falling glass from the ceiling all but slices her pal's face off. And don't let the bright red paint blood fool you. This film is the granddaddy of modern horror, and is an inspiration to many movies here in this video. Also, make sure you check out the 2018 remake, because it's actually pretty damn good. Number 5. Scream. I know, but wait a second. When you're talking about the best horror movie openings, it has to be included in the list. Probably one of the most infamous horror movie openings of all time, Scream is the ultimate show of selling a character's star power short within the first 10 minutes. knocking Drew Barrymore off before 15 minutes of the movie has even played out, and that's to say nothing of her poor boyfriend. Acting as a spoof movie that blew the slasher genre wide open again in 1996, the opening remains one of the most ingenious of all time. A man rings up a lonesome Barrymore while she prepares for a night in watching a scary movie, and she's soon forced to live out her own when the mysterious caller subjects her to a surprise test with dire consequences. With a surprising amount of bloodshed and questions that will have you screaming at the screen, the opening scene is one that has branded itself as one of the best in the Horror Hall of Fame. That opening shocked audiences, and it's hard to not think of Scream without thinking of that incredible opening sequence. Number 4. When a Stranger Calls. This one feels like something of a cheat considering it's almost a good 20 minutes long, but it's such a banger of an entry it would be wrong to not include it. The inspiration for the iconic opening of Scream, as well as gathering critical acclaim and cult success for the opening stretch, When a Stranger Calls sees babysitter Jill receive numerous ominous phone calls asking if she's checked the children. Jill, as it turns out, has not checked on the children as she's been told by their mother to be careful disturbing them, and as perhaps the worst babysitter ever, continues to not check up on them for several hours while she's in their home. As it turns out, this actually saves her life. Police trace the phone call to inside the house and find out upon their arrival that a murderer has camped out in their room and done away with the two poor kids whilst lying in wait for Jill. It's a masterclass in tension and mounting stakes, and even if it'll have you screaming at the screen as to why Jill's not doing her job and checking on the damn children, it's the sort of horrific scenario that stays with you long after watching. Number 3. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is on a short list of films that can always be remade, its story repurposed to represent the social and political issues of the time. 1978, arguably the best, is easily the most frightening, and the opening scene less about abrupt horror or terror, but an atmosphere-setting, paranoiacs fever dream that only intensifies until the thrilling conclusion. As the credits roll, we witness the alien species, just globs of translucent gel floating through space, quietly invade San Francisco. They land on plant life and insidiously start to grow stems. Soon, a teacher on a field trip casually picks one from a leaf. But the invasion, unbeknownst to her, has already begun. A nun walking past her gives her a knowing look, and a priest sits silently on a swing set, knowing that it's just begun. Donald Sutherland's health inspector starts to investigate the duplicate bodies later in the film, wandering through the crowded city as more and more faces watch him, the soundtrack pulsating like an alien heartbeat. Number 2. Halloween. Legendary in all the right ways, Halloween is John Carpenter's masterpiece, and Michael Myers has long stood the test of time for terrifying movie audiences young and old. Stoic, unfeeling, and incredibly fast-paced for a man that never runs, there's a myriad of reasons why Myers is so scary, but all of them come to being in Carpenter's exceptional opening 5 minutes. Filmed in POV style as an unknown watcher stalks a family home, Halloween begins slowly but surely as the camera sneaks through suburban bliss, depicting an outstretched arm picking up a knife before heading upstairs to use it. Voyeuristic in the most hedonistic way, we're then strapped in to watch a young girl get stabbed repeatedly, telling the audience that whoever is doing this is as sick in the head as they are emotionally unwavering in their murderous endeavor. And then it's all over. It's only when the masked killer then heads outside that he's revealed to be a 6-year-old child, and history was made in both Haddonfield and in cinemas around the world. And also that soundtrack? Absolutely genius. And we're finally here at number 1, Jaws. The granddaddy of shark films, the big guy of horror movies, the cool dude of Steven Spielberg's long and wonderful filmography, and now titled the bad boy of scary openings, Jaws is still the ridiculously high set bar for movies to aspire to. Considering the shark only has a total of 4 minutes of screen time and isn't fully revealed until an hour and 21 minutes into the movie, a constant dread is felt throughout for the ocean-dwelling beast, accompanied by a chilling, iconic 2-note motif within its theme. It's just a damn good movie that sets its horror tone perfectly from the get-go. Opening to some carefree youth swimming on a beach at night, the water isn't safe for dear skinny dipping Chrissy, which to be honest she should know since the naked ladies are always first to go in these films. Expertly switching between unknowing prey and lurking predator, the camera tells us that something is coming. but not exactly what, creating a masterclass in tension until the very first bite. After that, Chrissy's all too real reaction as she sloshed around the surface before blipping into non-existence is something that will stay with you long after watching.